Hey guys, how's it going? Well, today I'm working on the van, and I figured I've got a bunch of this little insulation bits like this, polystyrene, to put in this wheel well area, and I brought some of the other stuff that I had left over in my other van because might as well use it. I got quite a large cavity to fill here. I've got quite a bit in here already, but so let's just start. I got some stuff on the floor, and I got some other stuff, and let the good times roll. So the reason I thought of this topic is because somebody recently made a comment on my YouTube channel that polystyrene is not good for you, and is toxic. And so, unfortunately, the guy didn't really say it very nicely. He said something like, do your research. I don't know. He just kind of said it in a rude way. And I don't know why people got to be like that, you know. You can always say it nicely. You don't have to be a jerk. Anyway, so I looked it up, and sure enough, polystyrene, which is a form of styrofoam, is toxic to some degree. However, the majority of what they were saying, from what I read, was to do with using styrofoam cups and styrofoam plates. So when you're eating off styrofoam, basically the food is hot often, which means that you're causing heat is a catalyst for chemical change. When you add heat, then you're more likely to get the negative effects of the toxins in the styrofoam. However, I don't know, I'm not eating this stuff. Am I breathing it in? Yes, but it's not really airborne unless I'm using a saw and cutting it. Then, I don't know. There's so many things that can cause you problems in this world, but it's all a matter of how much you want to freak out about it, I guess. So, so polystyrene, potentially bad for your health, and of course, I'm going to be surrounded by it. But I'm not too worried about it because, like I said, I'm not eating off of it. I'm not causing any chemical changes within it by heating it up. And it's inert, right? So I'm not breathing in the dust unless I use a saw and cut it, and cause the fine particles of dust to go everywhere. So in the building process is the most exposure I'm going to get to it. And and the other thing is, you have really, if you're not going to use this stuff, what are you going to use? I mean, there's limited options. This stuff is not going to cause problems with water. There's other things you can use, like denim and all this stuff, or the regular pink insulation, which is way worse. But I'm very concerned about water absorption, and then you got moisture problems and potential mold problems. So I think that's a bigger threat than actually the toxicity of the material itself, of the polystyrene. But that got to be thinking about the toxic nature, or it got to me thinking about living in a van versus a house, and which is more toxic. So, okay, so you got the building materials, and kind of like, I'm going to go through the negatives of the van first, and then I'll do go to the apartment stuff, sticks and brick stuff. So you have everything in a van, everything is closed in, especially this van is very small, right? So everything around you is going to be closer to you, and you're going to breathe it in more. Of course, if you have lots of ventilation, that won't be such an issue, and I'm hoping to be able to achieve that. The other thing with living in a van is gas. You know, using various forms of gas, using propane, which not only is there concern about carbon monoxide poisoning, or lack of oxygen from the propane heater, but even just like, you know, I've read up on propane, and it's not actually harmful to humans in small doses, right? It's not poisonous to us, but it's certainly not going to be good for you. So I don't know why I'm cutting these ones. You can just rip them. So maybe I can just stick this whole thing in. There's a propane issue with the heaters and all this stuff that's going into, you know, and you're around. Basically, the more natural things are around you, the better it is for you. And I don't know if propane is a natural gas or if it's a human-made gas. I'm not sure. But if it's not natural, or even if it is natural, if you're exposed to it too much, it's not going to be good for you. So propane is a concern. And butane is a concern. Like, I use a butane stove to cook my food on. And I notice a lot of van dwellers just kind of cook in their van, and you know, they might not have adequate ventilation and stuff. So all those gas fumes, they're breathing them right in. And that can't be good for you. I mean, you read over and over again on all these warnings saying, warning, warning, do not use this indoors. Use it outside only, blah, blah, blah. But what are we doing? We're not using them outdoors. We're using them in an enclosed area. So that can't be good for us. Now, if you have your a vent or a roof fan that's on, that's the best way to do it, is to have some kind of fan to suck out the fumes as you're using it. When I melted my fantastic fan, I actually haven't done hardly any cooking in my van at all since then. For two reasons. Number one, I don't have a fan to suck out the fumes. Number two, I'm so immersed into building this current van that I'm trying to use my time as wisely as possible. And when I cook something in the van, it's about an hour long endeavor. By the time you cook it, eat it, and clean up the dishes, it's an hour. And I'd rather just eat something like a burrito or whatever, and then go right to the van build. So butane is an issue. Those are the three major things: propane, butane, and the proximity to potentially toxic materials, because you're in an enclosed space. And because you're in an enclosed space, everything, the toxicity is amplified. So those are some things I thought about. Now, when you compare that to a house or apartment, you're not in a tiny little space. You're in a large space with lots of room to move, and there's way better air circulation, etc., etc., etc. This is gonna take forever. Now, there's other things you could say about health and living in an apartment or house versus a van, and that's stress. Kind of like the negative part of living in an apartment or a house is that you have to pay for rent or mortgage or whatever, and that is living the van life can be a lot less stressful. Because your bills are less. No matter what happens, if there's an earthquake or a major natural disaster, van dwellers are going to be much more likely to be able to ride it out, as long as nothing happens to the van, of course. Because all you really need is food. I mean, honestly, the worst case scenario, something bad happens, I can just park on the side of the road and live in my van, and if I got a sleeping bag, I'll be warm enough to survive. I won't be really comfortable, but I'll be able to survive. And the only thing I really need to get is food. And water, of course. Everything else is just kind of a luxury. So that means my costs are going to be way lower. And like, say if the economy say if we go into another Great Depression or something like that, the economy goes down, van dwellers are in much better position to survive financially than somebody who's paying a big, huge mortgage or something like that. Therefore, there's less stress living in a van. I have a friend that has a beautiful condo, and he paid a lot of money for it. And he's saying about how he has to go to work all the time to pay for it, and he doesn't really have time, because he gets home from work and he makes his dinner, or he goes to the gym and works out, watches TV for 2 hours, and then he has to go to bed and do it all over again. And that is, I think, a familiar story to most people. You're constantly having to make sacrifices in terms of how you spend your time because of the bills you have to pay. So ideally for me, once I'm done this van, I'm going to be able to do a lot more things that are just going to be for fun. Like, ideally, like a friend of mine that I know, he's always complaining about paying high rent. And I said, man, well, you just move into a van. He's not open to the idea. He just thinks it's weird and everything. But if he did that, I mean, the guy has no children. He's not married. He's probably not going to get married anytime soon. He has 2 jobs, neither of which he likes. And he works his butt off just to barely make the ends meet. And if he moved into a van, he could probably just have 1 job and maybe even work like 20 or 30 hours a week and have all his bills paid, But, he doesn't want to do the van thing. So to summarize, is living in a van more toxic than living in an apartment or a sticks and bricks house? I have to say that yes, it is. I think it is. Just because the nature of using the various gases to heat and cook with in a small space, and especially if you're not using adequate ventilation, and also because just the nature of it being a small space, if there is any toxic materials in your van, you're going to be much more likely to be in close proximity to them, which means, it's kind of like toxins are all around us, but are they harmful? Yes, but it's all a matter of degree, right? If you live in a mountain cabin and you heat your house by your log cabin by wood, and you don't use you just use cotton and natural fabrics and natural materials, chances of you getting cancer are going to be a lot less versus somebody who lives in say a high rise in Hong Kong or something, where they work in a factory exposed to toxins all day long, and you should keep that one that's nice and big. And the air that they breathe and the water they drink and all the stuff that they're around is a lot more toxic. So it's better not to. So because it's more toxic, the chances of you developing something like cancer are a lot higher. So it's all a matter of degrees. So it's all a matter of degrees, meaning that the more you are exposed to it, the negative stuff, the more likely something is going to happen. And if there's a little bit of something that's bothersome, like polystyrene, if you don't have any stress and if you have less exposure to other toxins or whatever, the chances of something happening like cancer are a lot less likely. So, is living in a van more healthy or less healthy than living in an apartment? Well, they both have their trade-offs, I think. And until they do some kind of like scientific study, I'm not going to have a definitive answer. And something tells me they're not going to do a scientific study on the subject of van dwelling anytime soon. But at least it's something to think about, you know. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a good night.